Do you all remember after 9/11, there was a national mantra, and it was, if you see something, say something. Remember that? Right? If you see something wrong, possibly dangerous, say something. It seems now our national mantra is, if you see something, pretend you don't. If you see something off, you're a bigoted jerk. If you see something destructive, for God's sakes, shut the hell up. Thought police, word police, and the worst interior editing of ourselves is making our nation into something unrecognizable, like the image in a funhouse mirror, only not fun at all. This past week, we even see Jordan Peterson being called to licensing re-education camp so his words and thoughts can be corrected. Jordan is to be admonished by those who are as unlikely to be his intellectual equals as the Senate is to be filled with those who actually read the bills. It's like the world has become one big middle school girl hell, where being on the outside is an existential risk and being mean is the standard MO. The COVID disaster has truly showcased the great dangers of central control. And maybe this revealing will be the silver lining of such catastrophe. In preparing to host tonight's speaker, I kept hearing, say something, because that's exactly what Jennifer Say did when she refused to be silenced. The name of Jennifer's Substack, to which you should subscribe, by the way, is indeed Say, S-E-A, Everything. On track to become CEO of an iconic American company, Jennifer's career took a sharp turn when she would indeed not be silent. Like Naomi Wolf, Steve Kirsch, Robert Malone, basketball star Enes Kanter, now Enes Freedom, all previously celebrated darlings of their respective fields, Jennifer too made the misstep of sharing concerns. Not the concerns du jour, but the wrong concerns. Formerly a self-described left of center progressive, hope I got that right, Jennifer, she committed the sin of defending at-risk children in harm's way from the oppressive shutdowns. She chose integrity over her job, a distinct act which I hope will inspire you too tonight to use your voice. Because as she demonstrates, once you speak up, you are forever changed. Jennifer did it in a profound way regarding the world of competitive gymnastics. This 1986 U.S. gymnastics national champion and 7-time member of the U.S. women's national team used her voice to reveal the cruelty inflicted on children in the sport. And she was unwilling to be bullied out of her principles again when it came to standing up for children in public schools during the damaging shutdowns. I like it when people who didn't expect to be here with us come to speak. I like it when the principles of liberty burn through lies, propaganda, and assumptions. And though I've only known her for a few hours, I like Jennifer Say because she is refreshing and morally courageous. Please help me welcome to the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley, Jennifer Say.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming. Jennifer Say, that's me. The Substack is Say Everything. I'm not correcting you, Jane, but it's Say, S-E-Y, Everything, and I'd love it if you'd check it out. I am Jennifer Say. I am 53 years old. I am so happy to be here with you tonight. I am married. I have 4 children. After 22 years at Levi's, rising the ranks from an entry-level assistant, 22 years. I was on the verge of 23. I was on the verge of becoming the CEO. I made it to brand president. I almost became the CEO, the first woman to hold that job. They've still never had one, but then I didn't. And the story of that is what I'm here to tell you tonight. I quit. I actually quit. I wasn't fired. It's important that I tell you that legally. For legal reasons, I was not fired. But I quit so that I could keep my voice. And it's been a very difficult year. It's almost a year. I'm a few weeks away from a year at this point, but I have not regretted it, not for one moment, because to me, I am not me without my voice. I am not me if I cannot say what I think. I am not a person if I don't have my voice and I don't say what I think. That was not something I was willing to give up, and I don't think you are either. But today I'm going to tell you the story of how I got there. I'm going to go back in time a little bit because I think the background is important. I had a very unusual childhood. Jane mentioned it. I was an elite gymnast. I trained 6, 7, sometimes 10 hours a day. From the time I was 10 years old, I hope no one fell. And in 1986, I became the national champion. That was 9 months after breaking my femur at the World Championships. So it gives you a sense of how tough this sport is. During my time as a gymnast, I endured a forced starvation diet of less than 400 calories a day. That's what was required. I was fat shamed over the loudspeaker at the gym for gaining 1/4 pound. I weighed 98 pounds at about 18, 19 years old, but it was announced on the loudspeaker at my gym if I was too fat to compete. I don't coach fat gymnasts. You're not going to nationals. I was screamed at. I was called lazy. I was called a piece of garbage. I was forced to train on serious injuries, including a broken ankle for 2 years, which is not right to this day, as you might imagine. And I broke my femur at the World Championships in 1985, came back less than a year later. It sounds brave. It was, in a sense, but it was also self-annihilating. You can imagine how difficult that was for a child, and that as a child, you don't challenge it. You want to please the adults around you. You have this dream. They all want it for you. So even as you disintegrate, you keep going. When I left the sport, I was depressed. I felt no pride. I felt shame. I suffered from PTSD. I didn't know that's what it was called. I had terrible nightmares every night, and I thought I had no value in this world beyond that stupid sport that was done with me and I was done with. I then the way I made my way to California was I came out and I went to Stanford, just down the road, and ended up in San Francisco after that. 20 years later, in 2008, I wrote my first book, a memoir called Chalked Up, and it exposed the abuses in the sport of gymnastics. It was the first-person account to do so. I was the first person that talked about the cruelty, the emotional, the physical, the sexual abuse that is rampant in the sport. I didn't realize how controversial that would be. I thought everybody knew. We all talked about it. I thought it was an open secret, not a secret. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to talk about it. It's my naivete that gets me in trouble, but I can't not say the true thing. But let's just say the world inside the sport, the Olympic movement, they were not ready for this message, and it sucks to go first. It is not fun, but somebody has to do it. I was dragged in the press and across the internet for saying things that were patently true, that everyone in the sport knew were true. That emotional and physical abuse is rampant, the coaching culture is one of extreme cruelty, and children are abused as a matter of course. Medals and adult reputations matter more than the well-being of children. I wrote the book because I continued to suffer 20 years later the repercussions of this training environment. I did it because I didn't want other young athletes, children, to go through what I went through. I did it because what I said was true, and the truth matters. I wished that some adult had stood up for me when I was going through it, rather than protect the reputations of coaches and USA Gymnastics officials and US Olympic Committee leaders. 10 years after I wrote the book, Larry Nassar, have you heard of him? Yeah, everybody's heard of Larry Nassar. He was the doctor, I hesitate to call him a doctor, for Team USA. He went to prison for sexually abusing hundreds of young athletes, over 500 young athletes that we know of. And suddenly I was redeemed. The entire community in the sport, the Olympic movement at this point, pretended that they had always stood with me. They said, oh, Jen, she was brave, and we always stood with her. But they had not, and I remember. I won't point that out. I'm happy to have them join me. But I went from being a pariah in the sport, having lost most of my friends from, being a young person in the sport. But I went from being a pariah to a hero overnight. I was uncanceled. It's possible, I will tell you that. It is possible, but I got recanceled real fast, so we're going to talk about that now. I should note, and I tell this story only to say I'm not especially brave. Gymnastics instilled obedience in me, and obedience of a variety that I think is hard to fathom. It's hard for regular people with regular childhoods to understand how brutally insistent the sport is and the culture is that athletes be seen but not heard, ever. You risked a spot on the team, you risked everything. If you said, you know what, my ankle hurts or I'm hungry. If you just said a thing that was true, you risked everything you had trained for. So you didn't do it. All of this is to say it's very hard for me to screw up my courage and speak up. I don't come by it naturally. I don't like to stand out. I don't like having to be the one to say the thing that needs to be said. I have to prod myself. I have to push myself to do it. I'm not a contrarian by nature, unlike my husband who loves a fight. I don't like being hated. As an aside, as I was going through my drama, which I'm about to get through at work, I would come home, or not come home, we were home, it was virtual. There was always home, always home. And he would say, why do you care what they think of you? They're morons. And I said, I don't know, I just do, I care. It didn't stop me. But anyway, I don't like it. I hate it, in fact. But I am loyal to the truth, and I care about children, and I will endure the slings and arrows of a vicious mob to stand by both. I have to. We all have to. What choice do we have? In 2018, when I was redeemed with the Nassar conviction, I didn't realize I was about to go through it all again. I had about 5 minutes where people liked me. That was fun. Only this time it was going to be far worse because I would go up not against this tiny little sports community, gymnastics community, I mean, who really cares? Just not coaches, athletes, and organizations leaders, but what felt like the entire world. COVID, right? The entire COVID industrial complex. That's what I was about to embark on, but I enjoyed my 5 minutes of people liking me. And then in March 2020, when I was in my 8th successful year as the chief marketing officer at Levi's and about to become the brand president, I spoke out about the harms to children from school closures during COVID. From the first day, I had no pause. I had no, well, let's see how this goes, or maybe we'll just see 2 weeks. Nope, I think I started in February, actually. I knew it was bad. I knew it was wrong from the beginning. I kept my advocacy to children. I didn't like any of it, but I thought kids are that's the bridge issue. I can get people to listen because nobody wants to harm children. I was wrong. I didn't know it when I spoke out, but it would end my career, one of close to 23 years at Levi's. In February 2022, I walked away from my job. I quit my job as the first female global brand president of Levi's after more than 2 decades in the company. I had given the better part of my life to this brand and this company because of the product itself. This is one of the very few days I dressed up for you all. I'm not wearing Levi's. I still wear them almost every day. I love my 501s. I prefer a button fly to a zipper. I may have chosen to work there in the beginning because of the product, and I had worn it since I was 7 years old, but I stayed because of the culture. I loved it. I believed in the things that we said. We said we believed in profits through principles and harder right over easier wrong. We said use your voice. That's what we told people to do, but we didn't mean it. I meant it, let me just say that. These oft-repeated refrains were rooted in the company's heritage, one of rugged individualism and corporate philanthropy and populist inclusiveness. I was nothing short of heartbroken to find out that in practice, it was all lies. They were buzzwords. They were empty. I meant them, but nobody else did. These phrases are shibboleths of woke capitalism and have nothing to do with the company's current guiding values, which are anything but inclusive or principled. Woke capitalism isn't and wasn't only happening at Levi's. I've spoken with some of you tonight already, and I know you see it everywhere. It accelerated in the summer of 2020. Almost every corner of American business has become frantic to prove its do-gooder, anti-racist, privilege-renouncing status. The companies were sending out memos and making pronouncements on Instagram. We were doing it. Everybody was doing it. This was amidst COVID and school closures. I was astonished. Who are the kids that we are harming? The children we are harming are the low-income children of San Francisco. 60% low income, disproportionately black and brown. But that was not okay to say. It was not okay to say that those were the children we were harming. All the buzzwords, social justice, anti-racism, equity, inclusion, every company promised to do their part in defeating racism and all discrimination, and only the foolhardy would dare challenge. Any suggestion of any doubt was defined as bigotry, and stories of cancellation were rampant. I did not yet know I would be among them. My company, we were among the wokest of the woke, and I was in on it. I was a lifelong lefty, but I was foolhardy. I was one of the ones who was foolhardy enough to challenge because I thought the truth mattered. I thought we meant what we said. I thought we wanted to give kids opportunity and be truly inclusive. I was a lifetime lefty, and I chose San Francisco, where Levi's is located, as my home in 1992 because I loved the free-thinking, freewheeling attitude. I felt like a weirdo my whole life. You know, I was this little skinny kid. I looked 12 when I was 19. If you ever felt like you didn't fit in, San Francisco was the place for you. That's what I thought. 30 years later, I didn't feel that way anymore. That spirit of radical inclusion that I fell in love with was gone. I'm sure you know this, you live quite close. It is now a place of such aggressive conformity that simply asking a question is a punishable offense. Imagine that. I live in Denver now. I moved there in 2021 amidst the school closures so that my children could go to school. How crazy is that? I had to move my family so that my kids could attend school. I gave up my city, my friends. I have fractured family relationships that I suspect may never unfracture. Because I pushed back on the mainstream narrative, the woke narrative, that children were filthy vectors of disease that needed to be isolated from the world, that needed to stay home forever until somebody said they were allowed to go out. I gave up my career because I will not fall in line with that lie. And so I'm here talking to you about the need to use your voice, which I suspect many of you do, before we all lose the chance. And we will lose the chance if we don't do it now. There is urgency here. Levi's the company and the brand was no stranger to taking progressive stances. I liked this about the company. They had done pretty incredible things in their past to stand by employees. They integrated factories in the 1950s before the law required it. Employees didn't like it, they did it anyway. They were the first Fortune 500 company to offer same-sex partner benefits before anyone ever talked about such a thing as marriage equality. I liked this about the company. I liked that they offered equality to all their employees. They never took rights away, they offered more to everybody else. That made me proud to work there. But by 2020, the stances meant to protect employees and provide equality to all employees. It had morphed. And now they demanded that all employees toe one party line, the Democratic Party line. Woke capitalism took over. Anyone who challenged it needed to be banished, lest they expose the lie, which exploits social justice causes to deliver profits for executives and shareholders. Business is the same as it ever was. I'm not complaining about that. I think there's a way to do that and do it ethically. But this trick, this charade of woke capitalism is what I take issue with. That's how we get people like Sam Bankman-Fried, by the way. So here's my definition. People ask me what I mean when I say woke capitalism. Woke capitalism seeks to build consumer loyalty through social justice stances rather than what the company makes and sells. Woke capitalism tries to convince buyers that companies are in business to do good and make the world a better place, not make money. That's not true. Woke capitalism seeks to brainwash the world with the message that corporations really care about employees, even when they lay them off at the same time as they are delivering unimaginable wealth to shareholders and executives through dividends and stock price increases. In service of this massive lie, woke capitalism offers free speech to some employees, but not others, not so free really. And woke capitalism ejects any employee suspected of wrongthink, pretending that these wrong thinkers are a significant threat to the very sensitive, equality-loving employees. thus creating a hostile work environment. They have to go. It's all a pose. In reality, the banishments are a maneuver to foster an illusion that the company is highly principled and really cares, so they can keep taking all the money for themselves. That's all it is. It's a deception that should be in plain view. Woke capitalists say, hey, look over there, to employees and consumers, and at the same time, the shareholders and executives are filling their pockets with obscene wealth. Did you know CEOs make it 351 times the average pay of an employee? It's obscene. It's a joke. So they're saying, look over here, we're doing all these good things, we stand for all the right things, now we're going to take all the money. It's like a kid who steals cookies from the cookie jar when no one is looking, and then he lies about it to his mom, despite the fact that he's got the crumbs all over his face and the jar is empty. Except the woke capitalists actually convince themselves they are being honest about what they do, rather than distracting in order to gorge themselves. The corporate grifters really believe that they're do-gooders. They do, I swear it. I sat in boardrooms for years, for decades. They buy the thieving charade, and it's why it's so convincing to so many. Of course, woke capitalism is more than just one thing. For some, it is capitalism's road to redemption. It elevates business beyond mere greed. These leaders, they don't want to be just rich anymore. It's not enough to be rich. They want to be celebrated as altruists and philanthropist heroes. But it's a lie. It's Sam Bankman-Fried. The true believers are very young and hyperactive on social media. They're the people that graduated from places like Stanford University, and now they're in the workforce, and they're very noisy. And for them, wokeism is a quasi-religion, and the workplace is where they proselytize. They don't have actual religion anymore. And even when these woke employees are laid off, they don't realize that they are pawns and they are being used to further the deceptive message from leadership. These unsuspecting employees are laid off primarily so that the rich can keep getting richer. I will tell you a story. In 2020, my company, my former company, laid off 15% of the workforce, about 1,000 employees, under the cover of COVID. During that same time period, of course, that bolstered the stock price, and the CEO cashed out $43 million in stock. He said he did the layoffs with empathy. The empathetic thing to do, the socially just thing to do, would have been to fight to get the stores open so we could keep those people employed. They needed jobs. They didn't need a $1,000 check, they needed jobs. That's not what happened. But he says we did it with empathy, and everybody believes it, which I don't really understand. Anyway, woke capitalism is a pose, it's a marketing strategy, and it's a way for these executives to feel like philanthropic heroes and be celebrated as such and get on the cover of Fortune and Forbes, just like Sam Bankman-Fried and Elizabeth Holmes. There's a lot of them here. You guys get all the good ones in this area. But they're just trying to make money the same way they always have. This time, though, they're selling a side of righteousness and social justice with T-shirts instead of offering mere assurance to a teenager that he's going to look cool on the first day of school, which is really the only reason a young person wants a pair of Levi's. In their cynical way, these leaders are more relentlessly destructive than the most social justice warriors because they are protecting their money and their image, which leads to the money. If you push back on the causes of the moment, you are an apostate of the social justice movement, but really you're just getting in the way of them making lots and lots of money. You are risking exposing the C-suiters as frauds, and so like all infidels, the challengers must be ousted, and that was me. Which is to say, woke capitalism is, above all, a lie. There is no justice in it, only protection of wealth for the already wealthy. Levi's is the epitome of woke capitalism, and therefore I needed to be ousted. Having come from the progressive side of things, left of center, I was caught short and alarmed by the savagery of the progressives in policing their own. Perhaps, again, it's my naivete that gets me in trouble. I did not expect the unforgiving drive to purge the unworthy, which was me. For the side that supposedly celebrates diversity to trample anyone who veered from the government-issued talking points, schools must be closed, you must get the vaccine, to hold any such dissent as profane is such a transparent and obvious trespass against their own stated values. I couldn't believe it. Again, call me naive. At Levi's, the values of individualism, corporate philanthropy, and inclusion were supposedly baked into our DNA. It started at Levi's inception in 1853. Levi Strauss himself, the man, donated the first profits he made to an orphanage. This was how we operated. We thought, I believed in all of this stuff. I told you, we integrated the factories. We did all of this stuff. We gave same-sex partner benefits. We took to heart the phrase, charity starts at home. But we never took rights away from employees. We just gave more rights to all, even if it was unpopular. We still did it. But as the company's egalitarian principles for all mutated over time into woke capitalism, which I would say started around 2015-16, and then accelerated like crazy in the summer of 2020, it happened slowly and then all at once, and it oozed into every aspect of the brand's image creation. I participated, I contributed, I did not see it, and by the time I did, it was too late for me, and the mob had taken over. Our mission to clothe the world was usurped by employees demanding we fight to change the world instead, which seems ridiculous. We're a jeans maker. People come to us because they want pants. They don't want social justice with their pants. It all seems patently absurd to me, and I think that one little jean maker can actually make a really big, one big jean maker, let's be clear, it's the biggest jean maker in the world, can make a really big difference in people's lives. The employees that work there, you can make a real difference. Treat them fairly, pay them a fair wage, give people a great product at a fair price. That makes a difference in your life. I remember my very first pair of Levi's. But all this other stuff, no, that's not what's going to impact people's lives. But they forgot that. And they're trying to capitalize on the activism of young people to make money. That's really what it is. And so as all this was happening, even before my COVID dissenting began, I was pushing back because we were getting more and more challenges. You need to take a stand on this. You need to take a stand on that. And I finally was like, yo, hold the phone. We can't do this for every cause. We got to make the jeans. We got to market the jeans. We got to market the new boot cut or the low rise. Yes, it's back, unfortunately. That's what we have to do. And I was the only one. Everybody disagreed with me. So I was already kind of in some hot water. That said, during all my dissenting, I did get promoted, so I was not that hated. But I was the only leader that seemed to feel this way. They caved time and time again to the demands, the angry mob of young employees. They're afraid of them. They are. They're actually afraid of them. The company seems to not believe that Levi's is for everyone anymore. They only wanted the woke to work at Levi's, and they only want the woke to buy Levi's. They wouldn't say that, but that's how it feels. I mean, I know some of you in here have already talked to me about how you don't buy them anymore. As a person committed still to traditional liberal values like free speech and due process, those I thought my team were committed to, I felt like I'd been swindled. I really did. I was lied to. I felt like an idiot that I believed it. I worked at Levi's longer than I've ever done anything in my entire life because I believed in the things we said. But they were lies, and so my time was over. What marked the beginning of the end of my time was I was outspoken about the policies during the COVID-19 pandemic. Closed schools, closed playgrounds. I focused on children, masking of toddlers. I thought we could agree on kids, as I said before. I spoke out early and often. I expressed serious concerns backed with data in my very calm corporate diplomatic lady voice. I thought I could be convincing. I don't come across as an angry woman. I'm very diplomatic in the workplace. I tried to convince people that the restrictions unfairly burdened low-risk children, and they would drive learning loss, they would drive mental health impacts, they would increase the educational gap, all the things that we are seeing happening now. Those are the things I said in March 2020. I was hoping to bring some sense to these cruel policies that were hurting disadvantaged children the most, those most likely to be in public schools. My kids went to public school and do go to public school, but it wasn't about them. It was about the 50,000 public school children in San Francisco. 25 million public school children in this country experienced disrupted schooling for a full 18 months. 25 million, that's half. That's an insane number. As I pushed back and pushed back, I was told, you know what, you need to stop. You need to stop when you speak on behalf of the company. I said, I don't, I'm a mom. I get to say what I want. Just because I work here doesn't mean I give up my rights as a citizen. Only gradually did it dawn on me that our campaign slogan, the one I created, use your voice, that was the slogan, the tagline. It dawned on me by about fall of 20 that in fact did not apply to me because I was challenging the all-knowing public health authorities. The public health authorities that kept playgrounds closed for 10 months, closed beaches, boarded up basketball hoops, basically took every opportunity for every child in the city to exercise, to get outside, to get an education. They took that away from children. Those are the public health authorities I was not supposed to challenge. I don't accept that. That's ridiculous. I won't accept a lie. For saying that we should focus resources on the most vulnerable, the elderly being at the top of that list, while letting low-risk children have their lives, I was called a granny killer. This is what I endured in our town hall meetings on a weekly basis in the chat. These are the things. I was a racist, I was anti-teacher, I was anti-union, anti-everything. Oh, but pro-conspiracy theory, that's what I was. That was the only pro. I was forced to answer a question, are you a conspiracy theorist? As if anyone says yes to that question, because I said that closing hiking trails and gyms was a bad idea and that perhaps public health authorities might consider a Get Healthy outreach, given the fact that obesity is a primary risk factor for poor COVID outcomes. I was attacking the overweight. I was attacking the victim. This was all said publicly in town halls. I was a fat phobe. It goes on, the list goes on. I was denying science, the science behind the mandatory masking of diapered toddlers and the bleaching of groceries and plexiglass barriers and shuttered schools. That's science. While Levi's prides itself on being a company unafraid of taking controversial stands, standing up for children was apparently a bridge too far. That's too controversial. Why this anti-child, anti-low-income, anti-family stance became the woke stance might forever be beyond me. I'm not sure I totally get it, but it did. That was the stance that the woke cloaked themselves in. If you don't want to stay home forever and keep your children isolated and shoot them up, as many times as the government tells you, then you are a bad, evil, insane, alt-right conspiracy theorist. Employees called me every name they could think of. I even got anti-trans, which I never even talked about. I don't totally get that to this day. But if you're one of the things, you're all the things, right? You get shoved in the bucket with all the bad things. They were reiterated and given force by social media trolls outside of the company, and that's when things got bad. Employees emailed my boss and the head of HR. Twitter trolls started campaigns with the hashtag boycott Levi's. I mean, I was a goner. They called the ethics hotline. The gymnasts, the ones that liked me for 3 seconds, started a campaign to call the ethics hotline every day. And they all got what they wanted, sort of. I don't have a job anymore, but what they did not get was silencing me. I am louder than ever. They actually gave me a much bigger platform. So they lost. In January 22, I was told there would not be a place for me in the company going forward. Despite the fact that I was told I could be CEO shortly. Despite my years of service, my stellar work performance, a quick recovery as we came out of lockdown and COVID, it was determined that my views were out of sync with Levi's and that I was too big of a risk to the company's reputation. I chose to quit. I was offered severance of $1 million. I did not accept the severance, although I did tell them that. I did not accept the severance because that comes inevitably with a non-disclosure agreement. I was not going to sign a non-disclosure agreement because that would mean I couldn't talk about the terms of my departure, which I think are quite alarming and need to be discussed. Because I was told I couldn't work at Levi's because I stood up for children. That's insane. That's crazy. So I chose to quit. Now, I did so in a very public bridge burning fashion. That's okay. I wanted to leave on my own terms without the money and the non-disclosure agreement. I felt that as I went through this, not only I merged feeling, okay, it's not just children I need to stand up for, it's speech and truth. This is bananas. We can't have this. And I felt as I went through this process for 2 years with weekly meetings being told I had to stop saying the thing that everybody knew was true, I felt that the aggressive silencing of debate on matters of public concern, viewpoint discrimination in bastions of liberalism, supposed liberalism, like San Francisco, and the general obliteration of a culture of free speech were too important and needed to be discussed. And hey, I'll be the one to do that, I guess. Alarms needed to be sounded. I've said all of this publicly, and some of you have heard me on a few shows or read the book already. Maybe you've heard it, maybe you haven't. There is more to it, and it's about so much more than me. It's not really about me. I know it's not a huge deal that some executive who was very well paid, who has a nice nest egg and no way of supporting herself and her 4 children going forward, it's not that big of a deal that I got pushed out the door for spouting off on Twitter, which is and I went on Fox. That was the other one, which we can talk about. It is a big deal, however, why I got pushed out, and that should concern us all. If I can't do it, a well-liked employee of 23 years, can some regular employee do it? No. It's not okay. Oh, I forgot to mention, I also got in trouble for things my husband said. So that's completely insane, which I'll tell you later. So I got pushed out of the company because I stood up for kids, which was in direct violation with the woke narrative, which again, I will never understand. I said kids should be in school when politicians, the media, the Centers for Disease Control, local public health officials, teachers' unions, and everyone I knew ever all said schools must stay closed or else we'll kill all the kids and we'll kill all the teachers, and anyone who wants them open is a very terrible, very bad, horrible person. They were all wrong and I was right, but that doesn't matter. The wrong ones contrived consensus by silencing doctors, some of whom I know you've heard from here on this stage, or a similar stage. They silenced doctors who offered another perspective, as well as normies like me who just knew how to read data. It's not that hard. You just click on the footnotes in the Pfizer study. It's all right there. But I dared to continue to shout about it all, even after I was warned to stop. I was intransigent. I was nice about it. I said, no, thank you, I don't want to stop. I never yelled, I don't yell, but I failed to heed the warning again and again, and so I was a person unworthy of employment. And let's be clear, the firing, the canceling, at a certain point it wasn't about me. They knew they couldn't get me to stop. I mean, a couple months in, they were pretty clear they couldn't get me to stop. But everybody saw it. Everybody watched it. Everybody in the company saw it. And you know what? It kept them quiet, right? It sends the message to everyone else to shut up and not to challenge, to accept a narrative, even if you can see it with your own 2 eyes that it's false. How can anyone do this? I don't understand it, and I will never understand it. You cannot abide. You cannot do this. You cannot accept as true what is blatantly not true. We need to normalize dissent again. We all need to do that together. We need to ask questions. We need to challenge and not be afraid of what they'll call us, because the truth matters, and it is, in fact, everything. The canceling cannot continue. No one is worthy enough to outlast it. Maybe one day everyone will get canceled and there's like 2 people left and then that's it, and then we can start afresh with the factory settings restored. But I don't think we're going to get there. It's too much. But until then, I will keep speaking out. I've lost my friends, but I've made a lot of new ones, people like you. I've lost all my colleagues. I think they're told they can't speak to me. I've lost some family, not to COVID, but to COVID. And I've lost my job, but I am tethered to no employer, so I can say whatever I want, although I clearly thought I could before. And there is nothing the mob can take from me. I am free to use my voice, and I intend to keep doing so. I am loyal to principles, not party. If you ask me what party I'm in, I will say no party. I am loyal to principle, to truth. I'm against hypocrisy. I hate it on both sides, which is why I don't really want to be in either party. And I think there are a lot of people, you guys probably, who feel the same way. I think we're the majority. I think there's a small percentage who are willing to be big mouths and risk everything. I think there's a really big number who see it and are too afraid, and that's who we need to come on over. Those are the people we need. I don't care if you agree with me or not on everything. I'm sure there's plenty we agree with here, and there's probably stuff we don't, and that's okay. I care that you say what you think, and you listen to what I think, and we have a rational, reasoned debate. That you care about truth, that you're willing to have hard conversations and treat each other with respect anyway, even if we disagree. Why can't we do that anymore? We can normalize debate and dissent. It is crucial to democracy and to progress. There is no progress without truth-seeking. There is none if we don't hold power to account. And we are no better than an authoritarian regime like China if we don't. If we just accept government-issued talking points as truth. Guess where they do that? That's China. So we have to speak up and hold power to account if we want to continue to live in a democracy. The data is in, and the fact is I was right about kids in schools. Unprecedented learning loss. Low-income children were harmed the most. Everything I said, we are in the midst of a mental health crisis amongst our youth. I am in the process of making a documentary film on this subject, and I have talked to children across the country, and it is devastating. We have not yet begun to see the impacts. The children who disengaged in 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade, and never re-engaged and will not graduate, that hasn't happened yet. This generation will be impacted. It will be catastrophic. And we aren't even talking about how we're going to help them and how we're going to get these children re-engaged. But what I want to say to you is, what if we'd had this conversation? What if the voices, the doctors, the people like me weren't silenced and we were able to have a societal conversation about this? Might the schools have opened sooner? I think they would have. I don't think we would have persisted with this, but the consensus was manufactured. Here's a little fun story, and I swear I'm almost done. I resigned last year on February 14th, the day after the Super Bowl. I actually sent my resignation letter when my boss was at the Super Bowl. I resigned the very next day publicly with an op-ed on Barry Weiss's Substack. The very next day, on February 15th, the voters of San Francisco decisively recalled 3 Board of Education members. I helped start that campaign. I worked with the guy who led it. Depending on the board member, it was somewhere between 70 and 75% of the voters. Like, that's a crushing recall. Guess what? Those people agreed with me, but they weren't there when I was leading rallies in November and December of 2020. Why? Because they were too afraid to be seen there. But in the privacy of the ballot box, people showed up. But what if they weren't afraid to say what they thought? It's not just about the speech, it's about the outcome that the speech allows for. The schools would have opened possibly in November, December, or fall of 2020, a whole year sooner, and the kids would not have suffered in the same way. Imagine if those folks, that 75% of San Francisco voters, had shown up at the rally. That would have been thousands and thousands of parents. If they joined me and my husband, it was us basically, we couldn't have been painted as lunatics. That's why we need that. I think I'm going to use a round number, 50%. The people that see it but are too afraid, those are the people that we need. The 20 who are true believers, just leave them alone. Like, we don't need them. But the 50, the influenceable, we can get them, but we have to keep speaking up. That's the imperative. We need to have these conversations. If we don't debate the issues of the day, we can never reach the truth, and we do not live in a democracy. It is un-American, and it is wrong. I hope that hearing me say these things makes it less scary. I have a feeling you all aren't scared, but convince your friends. Less scary, more urgent. To say what needs to be said, to say the thing. You see it and you say it. Say the truth. Call out things that are false, especially when a vocal and punitive minority says otherwise. They're asking you to believe a not true thing. That cannot be accepted. If I can do it, the most obedient, conformist child you ever met in your life, I was a gymnast for God's sakes, then I know you can too. You must. I hope that hearing me tell my story helps everyone here and helps you convince your children and your friends to screw up their courage just a little bit every day in their own way. To say what you know needs to be said and what you know to be true, but haven't perhaps dared to say yet.
Jennifer shared with me tonight that her nickname as a boss as an executive at Levi Strauss was the Velvet Hammer. And I really get why that's true. Hey, you know what? I have to confess something. You had me at ethics hotline. Like, do we need an ethics hotline to behave ourselves? Is that common in corporate America? You can't just deal with things?
I don't know. I worked there so long, I can't say what's common. I think it's pretty common. It's like you can report whatever HR violations if you're worried about backlash and don't want to use your name. But the thing about the ethics hotline, it's not internal, it's external. So people outside the company can call. So here's there's times where it could be necessary. Like, what if somebody was taking bribes to use a certain supply chain supplier? Like, that should be reported. That's what it's for. Not because some lady said, hey, I think the schools should be open. But they don't like getting a lot of calls or 3 calls about one person. It doesn't have to be a lot. It can be like 3.
When did you start seeing the grown-ups being scared of the kids? You mentioned that they're scared of the young people.
I don't think, yeah, they are. I mean, I think there's 2 things going on. I think one, the young people in the companies are the age of their children. And they have been courting their children's approval. This is the age of I'm your friend, not your parent, right? So they are courting their kids' approval. They're afraid of the power of social media. They don't understand it. They don't know how to use it. Their, Corp Com lead does their LinkedIn, and they've never really looked at anything. But they're, somebody says, oh, this person did a tweet, and they're terrified. They don't understand. It's like one page, just like the headline in the New York Times. There's no relativity. And so they're terrified. They're terrified of a tweet, and they're terrified something will go viral, and they're terrified they'll be exposed. But here's the thing. I'm going to give you an example from Netflix. Ted Sarandos. Are you guys familiar with Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix? Okay. So here's what he did, which doesn't seem like it would take all that much courage, but he did it, and then it was all over. But I don't know why no one can do this. Okay, so there was a lot of controversy because Dave Chappelle had a show called The Closer, which is very funny, and you should watch it. Last year, or maybe sometime, I think summer 21. So there was all this noise, and he talks about gender stuff and trans stuff, and there was going to be this big protest outside of Netflix. But like 10 people showed up, right? But it was going to be thousands. The New York Times said, oh, there's going to be thousands of people there. There were 50 people. It wasn't 10. There were 50 people. There were 50 employees. And then afterwards, Ted Sarandos sends an email to the company, which has been published because you send an email and that gets published. And he said, we're a platform that reaches a lot of different people in a lot of countries. I think they're in like 200 countries. Lots of people watch it. We're going to show a lot of different stuff. If you don't like that, then don't work here. And guess what happened? No, he's still the CEO and no one quit. It was fine. That's my point. It's fine. Like it's fine. That's what I don't get in all of this. It's like, why couldn't my boss at any point have just said, you know what? You don't have to like what she's saying. She gets to say it. The day after I quit, it would have been considered fine because the entire school board, or 3 members of the school board, got recalled. So that's what I don't get, but there's just no moral courage, and they're afraid of the young people. And I think it started to happen around 2017 or 18, if I had to put but then in 2020, it just got out of control.
You know what? I think it's a sacred obligation of a parent to raise a human being that other people will enjoy, right? I think everybody gets a trophy turned into everybody gets a little a-hole, but anyway. You know, I had COVID, and it made me start swearing, so pardon me. It's my lasting symptom of COVID. It's been going on for over a year now. Okay, so there's some Levi's questions. Are you open to those?
Yeah,
okay,
that's
well,
fine.
one is why did you choose to resign versus a potential lawsuit? And then there's a kind of a sweet one about, do you expect the Levi's one day to contact you and say, you know, you were right and we were wrong, and what can we do to make it all right? And right?
Okay, wait, there were a few in there. Why did I resign? Well, the alternative, you mean why did I resign publicly? I mean, these were the choices. I could have signed the non-disclosure, taken the money, which also meant staying until they found my replacement. And they asked me to pipe down for that period of time. And I should mention, they just hired my replacement about 3 weeks ago. So I would have still been there, which was, I did not want that. So that was out, because I'd already been through it for 2 years, so I wasn't going to stay another year till they found the replacement to get the money with a non-disclosure. I could have just quit and not written the op-ed.
Could you have filed a lawsuit? That was the question for wrongful termination.
If I quit, well, I couldn't. They did sue me, but that's like neither here nor there. That's over now. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to say what I wanted to say. That was my goal. I consulted with a lawyer and I said, this is what I want. I want my voice. That's all I want. And he said, then do it your way. That was I didn't want money. I wanted my voice.
How do you think that the public health officials should have dealt with the resistance from teachers' unions to return to the classroom in the height of the pandemic? And by the way, do you know, Jennifer, what percentage of the money that the schools got has actually been used?
It's a very tiny percentage. I don't know the percentage. I don't think it's a question of what the public health officials were given too much power. It was this game of like this, right? Like the leaders were saying, whether it was the mayor and we can talk about London Breed, because she actually did sort of try, but the mayors or the governors would say, well, it's not me, it's my public health leaders. And the public health leaders say, well, I didn't make the decision. Even Fauci says now, right, like I had nothing to do with it. So everyone's going like this, and everyone has sort of plausible deniability. And the only one who said, I'm opening the goddamn schools, I don't care what the teachers say, was Ron DeSantis. I mean, they opened them in... But he had to go to battle with the teachers' unions to get them open, versus Kemp didn't have to in the same way. So I think it's less of a question about... The leaders didn't lead. And by leaders, I mean the elected government officials, whether it was the mayor or I don't live here, the governor of this state, they did not lead. And they used... public health guidelines to hide behind their terrible decisions. That's what it comes down to. You as a leader, in business as a leader, you collect a lot of input. you take input from legal, but you don't do exactly what they say, and you take input from all the members of your team, and then you put that all together to try to make the best decision for the business. Well, that's what our elected leaders were supposed to do, make the best decision for the people who elected them, and they didn't. They made the best decision for the teachers' unions and hid behind the public health guidelines and made terrible decisions for low-income families and all families really across the state.
Okay. So marketing is all about image and making the consumer feel something, and you're undeniably brilliant at that, Jen. But where do you see the branding of freedom being well done?
Florida.
I smell U-Haul.
I mean, do you mean like a commercial brand?
I mean, by anyone.
I mean, the challenge is, look, I traveled to Moscow in 1986 to compete for Team USA at the first Goodwill Games, which was like this rogue-style Olympic competition. Did I say 1986? What year was it? Yes, 1986, yeah. It was the first one. Ted Turner started it because of all the boycotts with the Olympics, right? And he felt like athletes shouldn't have to get caught up in that. When I went to Moscow, I took 20 pairs of 501s with me. Because I was told if you want to trade for sweats and leotards and pins with the Russians, who were the best in the world by like a long shot, not anymore, but they were, for many, many decades, that's what they want. They want 501s, they want Levi's. And that's because Levi's were a symbol of freedom, because they were a symbol of America and rugged individualism. And when the Berlin Wall came down, we have these photos at Levi's of men standing atop the wall wearing Levi's. That's what they were wearing. It wasn't product placement. That's what they were wearing because the brand embodied those principles. And I fear if we don't, meaning America, not Levi's, if we don't embody those principles on the world stage, then who does? No one.
Couple of questions about retail, actually. Some propose that the future of fashion will be in virtual reality, designing clothes for avatars who live in imaginary realms. What do you say about AI? Yeah. What do you say about this?
It's stupid. I don't know. This is maybe where I'm showing my age. We certainly started to dabble in it a little bit, and people were really pushing for it, you know, on my team, and it was the next big thing, and you had to do it. And, honestly, I fear, right, like if people aren't really leaving the house because they're in lockdown, and maybe people go out less, although I don't think people are going out less than they used to, are they? They are? Well, plane travel is back to 2019 levels, is my understanding, so people are flying. I think music festivals, just as one point of comparison, are back to 2019 levels. So young people are going out again and want real experiences.
I actually think people are actually wearing pants again.
Getting dressed.
We're getting dressed, yes.
Yeah, I got to
very
work
excited.
on that. I'm still home a lot. Anyway, my point is if you're home all the time and you still have this sort of like desire and like fashion like impulse, I guess, yes. But no. I think people like to wear clothes and express themselves with their clothes, and some things are timeless, and I don't think it will replace it.
Okay. So, do you get invited to, I think we know the answer to this, but I'd love to hear. There's a lot of speakers, as I mentioned, who didn't expect to be with us that we've hosted over the last couple of years, and it warms my heart tremendously. So my question is, have you been invited at all by anybody from mainstream media to any colleges to speak? Your alma mater, for instance? No.
No, I have not.
Yeah.
But of course you get criticized for going on, whatever, the one, to the ones that invite you. I've been on possibly almost every, I know the right-wing media ecosphere quite well now. I had no idea it existed. It's crazy out here.
There's a note here that says, welcome to the dark side. We conservatives love you and your pursuit of liberty.
Somebody asked me the other day how it felt to be a folk heroine of the right. I was like, well, it wasn't on my bingo card. No, I have not been asked. It's interesting. I have a lot of contacts, or had a lot of contact. Let me back up. My story in February 14th, 15th, 16th, when it broke, I will say this, was covered quite fairly in the mainstream media. So a lot of people, they heard about it because they saw it in the New York Times. I mean, I wouldn't say it was like excessively positive, but it wasn't excessively negative. It was very neutral. It sort of reported the facts and did sort of point out the lunacy. And even, I went on Squawk Box with Andrew Ross Sorkin, but even he said, well, you didn't have a contract, that says you can't tweet, you didn't really do anything wrong. This is something companies are going to need to sort. But since then, with the book, nothing. No one will talk to me except Glenn Beck and Tucker Carlson, which is fine. They were really nice.
Yeah, it's funny. So the first time we hosted Dr. Robert Malone, he spent a whole lot of time describing his credentials because nobody knew who he was, and he really wanted to prove that he had credibility. But he also said to me, I said, I know you didn't expect to be here. I felt kind of a little sensitive about it. I wanted to acknowledge the fact that it took a lot for him to come and be with us. And he said, Jane, and he was a Democrat, and we're, by the way, Liberty Forum is nonpartisan, but he was on the left, and he said, Jane, nobody on our side will invite us.
Yeah.
Right? And I guess it's still true, and that's just tragic.
The part I think, it's more than true. The reason, so I went on Ingram in March of 21, because when I moved my family to Denver, I tweeted about it, as one does, and it got retweeted by Jake Tapper. And so, which was weird, but happened. And so she saw it and she asked me to come on the show just to talk about, I'm red meat, right? This liberal left California so her children go to school. California is a shithole. No one can go to school. That was the story. So she invited me on, and I called all my open schools moms across the country, and I was like, I don't know, this is going to be really bad if I do this. And they said, no, you should do it. It'll be bad, but you can handle yourself. You're a trained media professional. You can do it. And I was like, I can do it. I'm not going to say anything I don't mean. I'm not going to get backed into any weird corners. And it was fine. And even people at work, and they lost their minds about it, they said, well, I don't disagree with anything you said. I just don't like who you said it to.
I don't even know what to say to that.
I don't know what to say to it either, but yeah, but we had tried, that's my point, is my grassroots group of open schools moms, that's what we call ourselves, we tried. Many of us had media contacts. I have tons of media contacts from my job. Crickets. No one would answer. So when Ingram called, they said my friends all said it's a national platform, people will see it. And you know what? Everyone at work saw it. So they watch it too. Good God.
That's great. I love that. Could you talk a little bit more, maybe give an example about the self-deception you saw with the whole virtue signaling and thinking we're just doing such great, important, kind things? That business is altruistic
God.
Basically, the business is a charity.
Well, it's not a charity. That's the thing. Don't forget, the most important thing still was to make money. That's why it's this two things are going on at the same time. They're taking these stances, these poses. I'm going to use Sam Bankman-Fried, my favorite person to make fun of. So he is waving his arms around.
Comfortably now tucked in his parents' home on the Stanford campus.
He's just down the road. He's waving his arms around about effective altruism and pre-pandemic planning and environmentalism and giving all this money to those causes and the Democratic Party. And he's stealing. Right? He's stealing. But the press is buying what he's selling, so he's on the cover of these magazines, and then the people buy it. It's this whole thing of lies, and he believes it, even though he's stealing. He starts to believe it. I'm just telling you, like, my boss believed it about himself, even though he made $43 million when an hourly wage worker was let go with nothing. He believes it because he said, I'm doing it with empathy. It's hard for you to understand this, like, psychopathy, but they do believe it about themselves.
It is hard to understand psychopathy. People sometimes will say, how do these people sleep at night? Very well.
They're fine. Don't worry about that.
If you've had a shamectomy, you are not tossing and turning.
Well, and here's the other thing is, like, there's this, like, unspoken pact. So again, I'll do the Sam Bankman-Fried example. You know, it was all sort of exposed before he got arrested and everything, because he wrote to I think it was a Vox reporter, this woke stuff, it's just a game we woke Westerners play so people like us. That's literally a quote. It's like burned into my memory. He wrote this to a reporter. Now, why would he write that to a reporter? Because he thinks they're on the same side and they're on the same team and they made the same pact, and so she's not going to expose it. Now, I mean, she's just a lowly reporter who makes no money. It doesn't matter. It's not about money as sort of what class you occupy, right? And journalists are of the elite class. And so when I walked away from the money and went public and continued to tell this story, it's so unfathomable to them. Like, they can't even wrap their heads around it. No one walks away from money. No one breaks the pact. No one publishes these insane emails that they sent me. No one thinks there's anything wrong with them. I didn't even think there was anything that wrong with them. I was telling Jane earlier, I got an email to prepare me for my apology tour. The questions you need to be prepared to answer. Are you with us or against us? Are you on our team? Are you a conspiracy theorist? Are you anti-science and anti-mask? What the fuck? I mean, and when I got the email, I was like, okay, I'll answer these. Like, I was even in the mindset of, I mean, I thought they were ridiculous, but I accepted that they were questions that could be asked, if you see what I mean.
In case you thought you fell asleep and woke up in a different time, in a different country, no, you're still in America. It's 2023, and somebody asked the brand president, are you with us or against us? Are you one of us?
My favorite is, are you a conspiracy theorist? Because I don't think anyone says yes to that question. I mean, even the most, like, wing-nutty conspiracy theorists, I don't think they're like, yeah. But I felt like saying, yeah, you're conspiring against me, so it's real. I will say, just so you know, I agreed to the apology tour because I refused to apologize. So I did not apologize. I simply explained myself. And I was convinced in my ability to build bridges and explain myself in a way that people would understand. And in fact, right after this so-called apology tour, I got all these nice notes saying, we understand. If I had children, I would do the same thing. And that goodwill lasted all of, a day.
Oh, a whole day, nice. So what do you, there's some curiosity right now about, should these such companies be boycotted? Do you buy Levi's? You told me about your beautiful collection of Levi's. It was kind of fun to think about. What do you think about that?
It's a tough one. I mean, I don't actually have strong opinions on this, believe it or not, because I have them on a lot of things. And I still wear my Levi's. I probably have 100 pairs. I think probably 95% of the things in my wardrobe are Levi's, T-shirts, everything, because I worked there so long. People like to wave their arms around and say they're boycotting a brand on both sides. The left and the right does it. And then I don't think they stick with it because it doesn't ever seem to affect their business. Or if they stick with it...
Hello, NFL.
Yeah, New Balance. Do you guys know New Balance, the sneakers? Do you remember all the kerfuffle about New Balance because the CEO and their head of comms, they were happy when Trump got elected because they make their sneakers in the USA, and they were like, his made in the USA policies are going to be Good for us. So all the lefties started burning their shoes on Instagram. And the company grew 8% that year. And it's a hipster brand. You can't walk down the street in Brooklyn without every, you know, middle-aged dad in like some Marvel t-shirt and New Balance. So I don't know, they burned them and went and bought them again. I don't know what they did. But the right does it. Both sides do it, is my point.
Well, what do you think consumers can do to make sure that their values aren't undermined by their decisions, their consumer decisions?
I mean, I think what I really want is for companies, look, no one gives up a product that actually is integral to their lives. That's the problem. Like, people are willing to kind of boycott things like that aren't that integral to their lives. Like, there's a bunch of people, this is stupid, but like boycotting Israeli products at Trader Joe's. But like, who needs couscous from Trader Joe's? Like, you just don't need it. That's easy. Most people aren't giving up their iPhone.
Yeah, that would really be the line in the sand, wouldn't it?
And you know what? A lot of parents, they're mad at Disney, but they're not giving up Disney. If you have a 3-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 6-year-old, it's pretty integral in your life. So I don't know. I don't think it's the most important way to express your views. I think buy the things you like. If you know, buy products because you like them, not because of the views of the company, but use your voice in other ways. If that's how you want to use it and you want to speak with your wallet, I don't have a good answer on this. I have limited belief it will do anything.
Okay. The story of your husband intrigued the audience, so could you tell a little bit more about...
Which part?
Well, I think about being ridiculed for his opinions. And by the way, she has such a great husband. I've been dealing with him to make these arrangements. Terrific. Good choice.
So my husband is, he has a more aggressive way of communicating than I do. Just in general, like in life and stuff, and definitely on Twitter, he's just been very like, we agreed on everything from the very beginning, but he had a very aggressive way of communicating. Even people on our sort of team reality would say, gosh, your husband's a bit much. And I'm like, well, he's right about everything. But anyway, I had kept, like I said, my public advocacy mostly to children because I thought that was kind of more palatable. He did not. He doesn't need to. He didn't work there. He doesn't work. He's stay-at-home dad. But I started to get a lot of questions about him. He was challenging not just vaccine mandates, but the safety and efficacy of the vaccines from like the first day. And so I got questions about him. In October of 21, my boss said, well, you're in the running for CEO. At this point, it was all hogwash, but we need to do a background check. Oh, and we need to do one on your husband too. I was like, that seems weird, but okay. I was trying to run out the clock, get to February, so I said fine. I was just like biding my time a little bit. Anyway, I think he just wanted a file to say, look here, this is how controversial you both are. Like it was a background check that was like for criminal, like I said, I haven't committed any crimes, I have no financial entanglements or indiscretions, but you're gonna find, I told him this before he did it, that my social media is a gray area and you aren't gonna wanna live with it. You aren't gonna want to. And I think he did the check just to have something in his hand to say, time for you to go, which is what happened. But he did one on they did it on my husband too, which I doubt they checked his wife out before he got the job, who was born in mainland China. Not that she's bad for that reason. She's not. Well, she's bad for other reasons. Anyway, I got in a lot of trouble for him. I had to answer a lot of questions about him and the things he said. And when I say I had to answer a lot of questions, there were many questions posed. My answer every time was, he doesn't work here. That was it.
That makes a lot of sense.
I support his right to say what he thinks. I support your right. just like everyone in this room, pointing to my, well, we weren't in the room, Levi's, my Levi's employees, I support your right to say what you think. I support his right to say what he thinks. And show me a married couple that agrees on every single thing ever, and I will show you a unicorn. Because he does say something. I never disagree with the content. I definitely sometimes would say things a little differently.
You've had your worldview shaken pretty strongly, right? I mean, you trust it. You've described tonight really trusting the culture of the company you work for. You trusted the people around you, that they really cared about what they were talking about. What do you suspect now that you also may have been lied to about, that you would not have thought maybe a year ago?
The one thing I will say is, a lot of things I didn't actually change. So yes, my worldview is disrupted, but I still believe in equality of opportunity. That's why I was mad that the schools were closed. Not equality of outcome, but equality of opportunity, which is what I always believed in. So I still believe in free speech. That's what I always believed in. I still believe in due process. I still believe my body, my choice. I still believe all the things I used to believe. I didn't change so much. So the shift in the worldview is that the institutions I thought also upheld these beliefs don't. I don't know if they never did or if they don't now. It doesn't really matter. They don't now. So what do I not? I don't believe anything. I don't believe anything.
I think a lot of people are in that situation right now where we just don't believe much because we've been lied to so regularly over the last few years.
I'm not a huge, it's this vast conspiracy. I don't think people are organized enough to conspire. I just think everybody sort of moves dumb and blind in the one direction. Yeah, I don't think we're not smart enough or organized enough to have this vast conspiracy from the WEF or whatever. It's just everybody starts marching stupidly in one direction and nobody says, hey, that doesn't make any sense.
Sheep, indeed. Okay, so you didn't expect to be here. You didn't expect not to work for Levi's. You didn't expect to live in Denver. And I don't know where your journey's going, but obviously you're a big hit because you are plain-spoken and honest and brave. Do you have a dream job now?
Wow. I don't really have one. I'm still not totally sure what I want. I'm very tired. After 2 very difficult years, I quit and went right into this media craziness, and then I wrote the book in 2 months, and I'm making this documentary film, and I'm going around and talking to nice folks like you, and I'm often asked if I want a corporate job again. 6 months ago I would have said no, never. Now I'm not so sure. I'm 53, I need to work. I miss working in an environment with lots of people. I'm home all day with my husband. So I don't rule out doing a corporate job, and I actually think there's a company out there that would let me run it one day.
I think there's some business people with integrity that would like to get together with you. So our final question is our regular final question, and that is this. Jen, these people are committed to liberty. They want to do something. One thing they're going to do is they're going to go, when this video comes out, you're going to send it to 17,000 of your best friends, right? You're going to make sure that the people who couldn't come because of the rain and whatnot hear this video tonight where Jennifer presented this powerful presentation. But what 1 or 2 things these people can do tomorrow morning when they get up to support freedom of speech, what would you say?
Well, I tell people, just do one thing every day in your own way. You don't have to blow up your entire life. I mean, you can if you want to. But, moms ask me all the time, what can I do? This may not apply to you, but for the moms that I know who still have young children, do you know that there are schools in California, in New York, that still refuse to do in-person parent-teacher conferences. I kid you not. I say, tell them you don't want that. Just call. Say, I want an in-person parent-teacher conference. That's what I want. If you don't say anything, they don't know. They think everybody's okay with it. If you live in Philadelphia, which is where I'm from, you know, they just reintroduced a mask mandate in public schools in Philadelphia. Call and say no. I mean, it sounds terrible. Send your child to school without one. It's terrible because for your 6-year-old to have to deal with it, whatever, opprobrium, but make them strong. Make them deal with it. Every day, little things. Like ask them at the grocery store why they still have the stupid plexi barrier up. Why? It makes it worse. Anyway, that's what I tell people. Something every day. There's these ridiculous things that are still happening every single day. Just say something, because if you don't say anything, that's the manufactured consensus. That's the lie that is furthered by good people being quiet. And they may seem like dumb things, but they add up to big things.
Thank you, Jennifer Say, the walking embodiment of integrity and friend of the truth.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you for watching our presentation. Please like and subscribe to our channel to get updates on new speakers, and consider joining the Liberty Forum of Silicon Valley. You can do so at our website. If you don't want to join, but want to support the principles of American liberty, you can make a tax-deductible donation via our website. The links are in the description. Thank you again, and stay free.